Priorities. How do we figure out how to put things in the correct order? With complicated lives and complicated decisions to be made, how does the schedule evolve? And what are the important elements that you need to start with when developing the right level of prioritization? All this and more on the Murdy Creative Co podcast. And welcome back to the Murdy Creative Co podcast. I'm your host, Colin Murdy, and today's topic is priorities. But first, I want to say thank you to everyone who's supported the company so far. If you haven't got a chance, go check us out on the web at murdycreative.co. That's MURDY creative.co, or you can check us out on all sorts of social medias. Wow, I was blown away by last week's limited edition launch. I always knew that Blue Bison, after that first launch, when we launched the composition cut, it sold out in 2 hours. I knew it was popular. I was like, wow. That was a good one. We got to bring that one back. I did 2.5 times the quantity as last time. I was so confident it was going to last for 24 hours. It lasted for less than 6. So obviously that was one you guys like, and that's good news because we are working on our own special version of Blue. It's incoming, and that rolls in nicely into one of the things that is the reality of our prioritization. We have a bazillion projects running. As a small business, you always probably have a bazillion projects running. And we have a very limited number of people and a very limited number of financial resources. So we have to be very smart with how we organize and order ourselves. This year, our focus has been very explicitly on trying to optimize our products and their launches around not having to spend an enormous amount of money, right? Some of the projects in the past have been very expensive in their inception. And we've been working on saying, how can we utilize the resources we have to optimize and to improve? Now, what that leads to is a development of a project schedule that's designed to really utilize the internal skills we have and not necessarily rely on anything outside this place. And I like that. I always prefer things to be done internally, but it means that we have 3 people basically doing a lot of projects at the same time. And some of the projects are big projects that are everyday projects, right? Customer service, production, marketing, developing the new content that we've got, right? Those are big everyday projects. Those require a little bit of time every day to do just the basic operations of the organization, right? Logistics and supply inventory, those kinds of things. Those are the everyday projects. And then there are enormous projects that are things like the pen launch and the new leather reformulation and the bag launch and the bag revision, I should say, and the database, right? Those are enormous tentpole projects. Now, those 4 projects represent what I'll describe as the major extensive expansions that we are working on as a company. There are a lot of little projects beyond that. The new catalog that needs to be made, the little changes to the website that we need to do. I mean, the website overhaul is an entire project in and of itself that has been unfortunately deprioritized pretty far down the list, and I'll explain why in a little bit. But there's a lot of little things all the time that need to be done. So they're little outside of the main projects that are day-to-day projects. There's big projects, and then there's little projects. And obviously, the little projects, they don't take that much time. They're not that complicated, but they're also not that big of an impact. And so you have to kind of evaluate what you want to do with your time. Now, for me, the thing I want to do, if I had infinite time in the world, would be working on my pen. I love the pen. I love what it has become. This is a prototype. It's not done yet, and there's quite a bit more to be done with it, but it's awesome, even as this is. And I'm really excited to get it out there. I really want people to see it. But as I've evolved in this project, as this project has gone along, it has gotten much, much more complicated. It is a complicated multi-component milled piece. Each one of those milled pieces themselves are complicated. They need to have their own unique ways that they're made. They have different speeds, feeds, tools, and the different ways that they run changes the way that they come out. They have times associated with them that are complicated and need to be kind of carefully organized. And one of the things that's evolved over this process is I always wanted to make it out of 304 stainless steel, but 304 stainless steel has some technical challenges to it. It's very gummy. It's the nickel content, which provides a lot of its... I don't need to go into the details. Anyway, the moral of the story is the metal itself is not particularly conducive for easy machining. It's been notably known for that for a long time, in fact. And another element of it is that when 2 metal components rub together, they have something called galling, which is tiny little metal shavings that form because of the two metal rubbing. Now, in a lot of things, the galling is limited by oil and grease, but for us, we can't have any of that in the design. So this all metal construction has to have an additional component to it. It has to have a coating, right? Now, we've looked at a lot of different coating options, but the one that's the most promising and the one that I'm very confident will be the best is Cerakote. Cerakote is a ceramic spray-on coating that's cured and is extremely hard and is extremely smooth and has a very high lubricity so that it works very well to make sure that the internal mechanism of the pen will continue to click exactly the same way for the 120 years that it's supposed to, if not longer. But the problem with Cerakote is that it requires the materials to be prepped. They have to have a surface finish applied to them initially, an abrasive process done to them. It has to be spray coated. It has to be cured, and then it has to be assembled. It has to be hand fit and finished. There's a whole bunch. So this pen, which was already pretty complicated to start with, has now gotten even more complicated. So there are multiple different components that need to be done. And that's to finish the prototype, right? I still have to finish building the paint booth, and we have to do the original tests of the Cerakote process to confirm that the design is the way it needs to be and all this other things. So there are steps to finish the first prototype of the finished fully pen, not to mention the clip, which needs its own manufacturing processes. But then there's also the complexity of actually manufacturing these things at scale, right? Producing these pens will demand an enormous amount of time, far more than I originally anticipated. It will demand, unfortunately, me to manufacture them for the most part. I mean, Anna and Meryl are brilliant, and they will eventually learn how to do this, but it's a complicated process now. There's a lot of pieces. There's a lot of moving components that need to be done right. And so I'm going to be the one to making them exclusively, which means that once these pens are launched, they're going to take an enormous amount of my time, which will preclude me from working on other things to some extent in many ways, because I'll be doing production mostly on these pens. So what I really want to be doing, what my desire to work on, unfortunately, is the very thing that would essentially consume my ability to do anything else. Not to mention that the actual development of it is incredibly time-consuming. Beyond that, it's going to take time production-wise that is going to get faster and better and more efficient over time, but it's going to be an evolving process that's going to not be good initially, right? And so in order to not be completely swamped and completely drown in orders of pens that we can't keep up with, we've decided, and I think this is the right decision, to launch them in rounds, right? They're not going to be limited edition like once they're gone, they're never coming back. It'll be more like I'm going to make a batch of 60 or 100 pens, and once we sell out of that batch, we'll make another batch, but there may be time delays. That way we don't end up getting stuck in a cycle where every single time I would go work on something else, I have to get back into pens and make more pens, right? I think this is the right way to launch it. I think the demand is going to be really high initially because they're really cool, and we've got a lot of customers that have been historic customers for us, and I think a lot of our historic customers will really appreciate this pen because it will solve one of the many complaints that people have had about some of things like our journals, mainly that they don't like the jotter. This will solve that problem for them. In fact, if you like the gel inserts from the Pilot G2 or the Sharpie gel inserts or the Zebra gel inserts or the Parker Jotter refills, this will work with all of them, right? So we'll have an amazing high quality pen that'll solve the main complaint for most people, but we'll also have an enormous demand, and it's going to be complicated for us to make. So I think batches are the right way to do this. But even with batches, it's going to take an enormous amount of time once they're launched. Right? It's a way to throttle some of that demand a little bit and help prevent us from becoming totally overwhelmed by it. But that doesn't make the time less, really. It just means that I have to be a little more efficient. I can be a little more efficient with the time itself. On the flip side, another project that we've got is the leather reformulation. I really want to get the bag designs finished and fixed and out, right? I've got great opportunities with the bags. We've got really cool new designs for the briefcases. If you're looking at buying a briefcase, if you don't need it in the next 2 months, I'd hold off. The new versions are coming, and they're really cool, right? But to get those designs done and out and get them launched, we have to solve the current formulation problem that we have with our leather, which is the bleeding, right? And I talked about this in a past behind-the-scenes email. Actually, I think it was last week's behind-the-scenes email that I talked about this extensively. The leather we have right now is beautiful. It's incredibly high quality. It is manufactured an hour from our workshop, and it is the very best. We put it through an enormous number of scientific tests to prove that. It's waterproof, it's water resistant, it's got a lot of qualities to it that are really good. but I wanted it to have that kind of oil feel to it. I love a good oil feel leather, right? But oil itself, if it's on the leather surface, acts as a carrier and it can pull the dye from the leather into the oil, and then the oil can be rubbed off onto surfaces. Now, for most of our products, it's not really an issue. Most of the batches that we've gotten haven't had an issue. But occasionally, we have batches where there will be a higher level of bleeding from whatever writing implement there is to whatever surface it's on. Like I said, for most people, it's not an issue. But for briefcases and for other things in the bag line, that bleeding will become absolutely mission-critical failure. It will not work. So I've gone back and forth with the tannery, and we've been doing rounds of prototyping to say, how can we maintain the look and feel of our current leather, but solve the bleeding issues? And I like what we've come up with. We're not there yet, but we're really close, and I like the new version a lot. So that particular project is a blocker for the briefcases. That has to be a priority. And more importantly, because it requires the tannery to take time to develop its prototype, each prototype, we have to wait, right? So the tannery, when it needs us to confirm things, it has to be the top of the priority list. Let's go right up to the top, right? We have to move on that. Because if it's not right and it needs more time, we have to get them back into working right away. And the briefcase line is arguably, the redesign is arguably actually easier than the pens, but it's still very complicated. There's a machine that's been sitting in the closet for 2 years because we thought we were going to use it for something else. We didn't end up using it for that, but it'll actually work as a draw knife. Now, a draw knife is a tool that allows for you to create one-off prototypes of leather by using it draws a knife using a computer across the surface of the leather and cuts unique shapes. That's the short version. Well, the machine that we've got, I have to kind of retrofit it a little bit to do it. It'll do it great, but it needs to be finished. It needs to be fixed to do that. It needs to be cleaned off. It needs to be set up in a location. It needs to have power routed to it. I need to nail down the software application to do this. I need to figure out a way to attach the leather to the cutting surface in a way that holds it down tight. And then I have to actually cut the designs, and that's going to require unique speeds and particular types of directional orientation of the leather cutting process to make it optimal for the draw knife and a bazillion other little things. But there are fewer steps to that than there are to developing the pen. And arguably, that's a product that needs to get revised sooner rather than later because it's already out in the market. It also is more in line with our normal operations. And so while the draw knife component of that particular operation is kind of unique and complicated and challenging in its own right, once the leather is cut on the draw knife, it then can go into our normal regular production where it's engraved and assembled by the regular operations, right? So that particular product, while it might have a slightly lower market appeal, right? It may not generate as much revenue as the pen might generate. It also requires less of me. It requires less of my time to actually produce it, and it can be done in a much more normal way for us. So, how do we schedule out our day? How do we organize our time to optimize for these unique strategies? Well, the database requires a little bit of my time because I have to work on brainstorming with Meryl about how to do this new thing, right? We've got tables that need to be redeveloped, and we've got user interfaces that we need to define, and there's tablets that need to be purchased and organized, and we have to limit those costs as best as possible, so we need to be efficient in how we lay them out. The reports need to be generated, the queries need to be written, all that stuff is complicated, and I need to be involved in the brainstorming session because I also need to know how they work. Now, Meryl can put them together, but I need to be a part of the initial process. But that's a production thing, and while it will improve our decision making and improve our efficiency of our money spend, I should say, it doesn't generate new revenue. And our production is currently working pretty well as is. So that is a deprioritized project. Similarly to the website, right? We're having pretty good yields on our website. We're having pretty good conversions. There are definitely ways to improve it. I have a handful of ideas right off the top of my head that are going to be fast improvements to the website. But we need to focus on the things that are more important first. So how do we define that? For every subcomponent of every project, they have their own requirements. For me to move the machine from where it's currently at to the main room where it will go requires at least 2-3 people, right? So I can't do that unless I've got Meryl and Anna available as well, right? Similarly, I can't put together the blasting cabinet, the painting cabinet that I need to put together for the pen unless I have 3 hours of time to do it, 2 hours of time to do it, because it's going to take up an enormous amount of space when it's in pieces. And so it basically needs to be put together all at once. And I don't want to lose pieces in the process. So if I've got 20 minutes, but I've got 3 people, well, moving the machine needs to be the priority. But if I've got 3 hours and nobody else, I need to be putting together the cabinet, right? So you have these requirements. When you are looking at these projects, the best thing I've found is to lay them out into their multiple steps, right? Lay out a list of all of the different steps that need to happen. Figure out what the requirements are to make those steps happen, and then to lay out the schedule. Now it can't always be done efficiently, right? But if you can at least get a sense of the steps, when time avails itself, when you finally find yourself with a moment, you can look at that diagram. You can look at that piece of paper that's got all of the different projects and the different steps and say, all right, I can get this one done. And you can circle that, right? You can go get that done, right? Now, to some extent, you need to balance out what you're prioritizing in some regards, because you don't want to get a project ahead of itself in the incorrect way, right? It would be incorrect for us to get all the way to the end of the pens and get those out and launched without finishing out some of these other projects first. Because once that project is launched, it's going to have with it a whole bunch of strings attached. And if those strings preclude the other projects from their completion, then launching that product and getting it complete is not a good idea. In fact, you'd be much better off holding off on it, focusing on the other projects first, and then waiting to get that done. But you have to balance that, because some projects may be relatively simple, but they're not going to generate much revenue. And projects that are big projects that are going to generate a lot of revenue may come with other strings after that. So for me, I've been really working very hard to figure out the right prioritization. And I also have to balance what I want to do against what needs to be done, right? So today I'm going to the tannery to look at another round of prototypes, and I'm very excited about this one. Maybe this one will be it. Who knows? And once these new versions of the leather is reformulated, it's going to be awesome to get that rolling. And then that will, like I said, open up the door to more of our opportunity with our bags, right? So step by step, we will make this project happen. Step by step, we will make all of the projects happen. And a lot of them have to run concurrently, right? I wish I could run my projects concomitantly, where we could just do one and then the next and then the next. But that's not how life works. You have to be able to prioritize multiple different projects at the same time. And as a business owner, to some extent, I'm in charge of my own time, which has its benefits and its drawbacks. When you work for somebody else, if you're confused about what you should be doing, you can go ask for guidance. For me, I got to pick. I got to figure out what the organization is going to be doing right next. And what I pick is what we're saddled with, for the good and the bad. So I am making progress on all these projects. I am dealing with the complexities of the prioritization of them all. And unfortunately, that means that all of them, it's not like I could just sprint to the finish line of one and be done, as much as I wish I could. There will be time for sprinting, but this is not it. None of the projects are at a position where I can sprint on them even. And if I could, and I did, they would have downsides. So I have to be okay with making a little bit of progress on all of them, a little bit at a time, across the board. And I have to prioritize them with the limited edition, but hint for today is Black Bison. Black Bison. And it's really cool. So I have to be able to figure out how to prioritize these things in a way that makes sense. I have to figure out a way to prioritize them with a bigger context, with a wider context of the organization and the long-term demands that each one will have on me. And I'm excited. I'm glad I have this work to do, right? There's nothing better than working hard at work worth doing. And sometimes it's hard to see the forest through the trees. It may not be fun to put together a paint cabinet per se, but if it leads to the pens, then it can be fun. So I appreciate all of you who've been patient about these various projects. I have a tendency to say, yeah, it's coming out soon, and then realize that it's quite a bit more complicated than I thought it was going to be. And so sometimes things get a little delayed. I am still optimistic about getting the pens out before summer. I'm still optimistic about getting the new leather reformulation done within the next month or two, ideally sooner than that even, if I can pull it off. And I am hoping to get the new bags launched within the next couple of months. And that's another side effect of the prioritization and the balancing act, is what ends up happening is that theoretically a lot of them end up being done around the same time. So you have these long stretches of nothing and no progress, it seems. And then all of a sudden you have 2 months where a lot of stuff happens. And that's okay. I mean, you could schedule it out better. That works out better, but it's okay to have things kind of come together all at once. And you have to be able to see that that is coming. You have to be able to find in it the patience to realize that that final solution that is coming is going to be better for all of the different pieces. And you have to deal with the minor little solutions in the meantime and be happy with those. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. Be sure to check back in next week for that next topic. And please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, comment. I want to hear how you prioritize things. Do you have a method of prioritization that you find particularly helpful or useful? Is there a good opportunity that I'm missing because I'm forgetting something? Let me know in the comments below. If you like the product and you want to leave us a review, you can go to murdycreative.co/review to leave us a good review. You can go to murdycreative.co/reviews with an S to read our reviews. And if you have any questions or concerns about the product, you can give us a phone call at 414-434-9001. You can text us at that number as well, 414-434-9001. We're available Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Central Time. If you don't get a hold of us, leave us a voicemail. We do call people back. Also, you can ask us a question on the contact form on the main page of our website. So if you go to the main page of the website, scroll all the way down, there's a contact form there. We're happy to answer any questions and do our best to help in whatever way we possibly can. So please don't hesitate. If you want a custom engraved item, we have no minimum order quantities and no setup fees. It's a simple flat fee, normally about $15. It can go up depending on how complicated your design is, but you can go to any of the project pages or most of the product pages, and there's a blue button that says Add Custom Logo Engraving. When you click that, it launches the customizer. Not every product is in the customizer. That's one of the projects that we need to get done. But most of them are, and you'll be able to reorganize and reorient and resize and do all sorts of things to your custom designs. Please don't use anything copyright unless you have permission. That's a whole thing for us, but you can get just one of something if you want just one. We do have bulk discounts available, so you can get a whole bunch of an item if you want a whole bunch of them, and the bulk discounts begin at 5, and it's only based off the total cart quantity, so you can mix and match if you want to get a bunch of different things. If you want to get a custom engraved item that isn't in the customizer, you don't see that blue Add Custom Logo Engraving button, you can send us an email to sales, S-A-L-E-S, at murdycreative.co, sales at murdycreative.co. Include the image you want engraved, tell us the product you want engraved, and we'll be happy to create a custom mock-up for you as well as a custom order link that you can use to check out. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Have a great day, and goodbye.